Welcome back to the Exalted Podcast, where every week we tell stories of hope, health, and healing. This week I have Jerri Ann Jensen on, which I'm so excited to interview her. She is the founder and CEO of Vital Strengths Training and Coaching, which is a program that I am super excited to start in January. I've heard such great things about it. I know several people that are in it. Her company is also the home of Cosmo, the most flexible leadership model in the world. And I know you can apply that to just so many things. She's got 25 years of experience that she's led teams and trained organized leaders to help them arrive. I love that. She's a lover of Jesus and her professional credentials are so long. She's a certified professional leadership coach, a certified Gallup Clifton Strength Finders coach, ACC, which I don't even know what that one means. We can dig into that one. And International Coaching Federation, We Align certified executive coach, and holds a master's of science in counseling from the University of Wyoming. That is a long list. I am so excited to have you on the podcast. So welcome.
Thank you, Jen. I'm glad to be here.
So I love that you have this long list of accolades. But what I love even more about your story is that you've overcome a lot, right? So take me back. I know that you've struggled, like we've bonded over this issue of body image and you've had your own struggle. So take me back to the beginning and where that started and kind of what sparked it.
Yeah. Well, the very beginning. So when you say the beginning, I remember, I don't know about you, but if on the playground at school, I remember I was having this, argument with another young girl. And I don't remember the things that I said to her, but I remember she said something to me.
Sure.
She said, "You don't know a lot of things about your family." And something about, I was like, oh my gosh, like, what does she mean? And something about that just really resonated with me. Like, there's some secrets.
Yeah, something
right?
stuck.
And yeah. And I started feeling, just, quiet and secure already. And I went home, and after discussions with my parents, what I came to find out is I grew up in this small town of 600 people in the middle of Nebraska.
Yeah.
Where everyone knew everyone. And it turns out my parents were high school sweethearts and had gotten pregnant with me in high school and then got married. And I know I could just tell from our conversation at the time that they felt ashamed about it. And I took on that shame,
Yeah.
like I'm shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
The enemy
this shame is
totally
about
uses,
me.
the enemy uses that against people for sure.
Yeah.
So then
It
what
was totally
happened?
how I was interpreting it. And there's so many voices coming at me,
Yeah.
Like, yes, you're like from the enemy, you're talking about from the enemy, you're a mistake, you're dirty. This was something that you weren't told. It was a secret that no one wanted to talk about, And I just took that on in my own identity, that that's who I was. And I remember telling someone how I just feel different since I found this out. And that person said, I was standing in front of new microwaves. They're huge at the time on the countertop. And we're standing right in front of a microwave when I said this. And that person responded to me when I said I felt different. They said, "Oh, that's stupid. You shouldn't feel that way."
Oh.
I remember thinking, "Oh, I'm stupid because I feel that way." Like,
oh no.
And literally, Jen, that was the last time I shared a negative emotion I had about feeling I had until college.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was
Our
standing in
little
front of the
brains
microwave
just
and I
take
started
that
eating.
stuff on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So you
So
started
right
eating.
then, I just started eating, literally. And that became this bonding with food.
Yeah.
Like, food became my emotional source of comfort.
Wow.
Where I would go.
And how old were
And
you?
it became an addiction.
Yeah. How old were you?
Around fifth grade. I don't remember
That's
exactly.
really
So
young.
fourth or fifth grade.
That's really young.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So then what happens?
That's the beginning. Yeah. So, so then I have this relationship with food, can't stop eating, to the point where I sometimes eat for a couple hours,
Yeah.
And then when I got in high school, I grew fat. I grew, like, I'm 5'6". I grew tall right away, but then I stopped growing.
Sure.
And when I stopped growing, I started gaining weight.
Yeah.
And I started panicking,
Yeah.
because I was an athlete. I thought, and everything in these small towns was around athletics,
Yep.
Everything was about. And I thought, oh, if I start gaining weight, I'm going to get kicked off these teams, you know,
Yeah.
and I won't get to play. And people will know, like, I'll look bad. I'll look worse than I already am. And they already think about me. And I was
Yeah. Of
trying to prove to everyone how worthy I was, you know,
course.
like
Yeah.
trying all these ways to succeed, to
Yeah.
prove I wasn't, to prove that I wasn't, like, something about me wasn't broken, you know.
Yeah. I can relate to that.
And
Did you know the
okay,
Lord at this time?
I had, I had, well, in middle school, I'd heard a message about Jesus
Sure.
and that he wanted to save me from my sins. And I thought, well, that sounds great because I don't want to go to hell, you
Yeah.
know? So it's like, okay, I want Jesus. And
Yeah.
I really remember believing that Jesus was the answer for me and that he would save me. But I didn't have a relationship with him. Like that's
Sure.
all it was kind of, okay, I get to go to heaven now.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that Jesus had things for me here today
Yeah. Yeah.
on this earth, full life. Yeah. So that's where I was at the time. Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So you're in high
Um,
school,
I'm in high
feeling like you're getting
school, started
kicked off
gaining
all the
weight.
teams.
Yeah. And another young woman who was on the basketball team with me said, oh, I told her, you know, something about like, I think I'm gaining weight. And she goes, oh, well, I just started making myself throw up. And then I lost weight. And I
Wow.
thought, that sounds like a good idea because I know I can't stop myself from eating.
Yeah.
Like I knew there was no way I could stop myself from eating. And so I thought, okay, I'll try that.
Yeah.
And, you know, and she said she just stuck her fingers down her throat and she could make herself throw up. And so it started this binge purge cycle for me, like my freshman year of high school.
Mm.
And it became, I mean, it was an addiction to the point of like alcoholic addiction, you know, like I would plan my
Yeah.
whole day around when I'd have enough time to eat as much as I wanted. Because I knew once I started eating, I wouldn't be able to stop myself and then throw up.
Yeah.
And I would plan about 2.5 hours, Jen.
Wow. Did you have any other like physical side effects from that? Because I know how hard it is on your body to not only
Yeah,
binge on a regular basis, but then to also purge on a regular basis. Were you feeling any of the effects of that yet?
I didn't feel anything. And by the grace of God, none of that showed up in my butt, has shown up ever.
Oh, thank goodness for that. Thank goodness for that.
Yeah,
So how
because
long
that
did
went on
this?
for over five
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. So you're in college now,
Yep.
freshman, sophomore in college.
Yeah, I'm in college freshman year, and I start getting involved with the collegiate ministry. And they talk about relationship with Jesus. And I was like, relationship? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah. What does that
You
mean?
know,
Yes.
I know. So they start talking about reading the Bible and journaling. I thought, okay, I went and got a journal. I have my Bible already. And as I started reading my Bible and journaling, I started encountering the Holy Spirit, you know,
Yeah.
and feeling like known by the Lord. And I started just pouring my heart out to him in my journals.
I love that.
And yeah, but the danger about being in college and living in a residence hall
Yeah.
and having a cafeteria is there's food always, and I could eat as
Yeah.
much all the time, you know?
Yeah.
And I started gaining more weight. And I remember it was freshman year, so I'm walking in residence hall by all this, like they called it a passive program that was about bulimia and anorexia. And I would walk by it and kind of like look at it out of the other corner of my eye, you know, like,
Yeah.
I was like, I can't stop and read this, but I'm going to look a little bit. um, and they said they can't control it. They can't stop. And I thought, oh, even though there's something in me that knew I couldn't stop,
Sure.
I still like, it was like a challenge. I'm like, oh, I'll stop. I'll show
Yeah.
them I can
Yeah.
stop this.
Well, I don't have a
And
problem.
I
Yeah.
tried.
Which you see a lot with like
Right.
any addiction, right? Like I can control this.
Yeah. You know, there's a part of me that knew I couldn't, but then there's another part of me is like, I will.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Decided I will. I'll show them. I'll show this passive program. I can do this. Right? And so I tried and I gained a bunch of weight. I stopped throwing up for about a week, but I couldn't stop eating. And
Sure.
then I panicked.
Mm.
Um, and it just got out of control. that I remember feeling like I was at the bottom of a tornado with no way out. Like
Yeah.
literally, like I
Yeah.
cannot get out of this.
Did anyone in your
And
life know? Was there anyone that knew?
you know, no. Later I had one of my best friends told me she suspected it, but she'd never said anything.
Sure. So totally
Um,
alone.
totally alone.
No, you can't do
I
it
think
on
how
your
does
own.
right. Yeah.
And then
You
what
think about that,
happens?
like how does no one know? Right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you're close and when you're living in close quarters with people in a college dorm too, I mean, you've got to believe that somebody knew. And I think that's such an important conversation. I just want to pull in this thread a little bit because we have to be advocates for each other and,
Yeah.
love one another. And I've just been through a
Hmm.
situation with, I have teenagers and all the things that go on, and just educating the people around us, the kids, the people that we have influence over to come
Hmm.
forward and ask the tough questions in love. But I want to hear the rest of your
Hmm.
story. So let's circle back to that. So you
Okay,
are at the place where
can I
you
touch
can't
base on
control.
that just for a minute?
Yeah.
What you
Yeah.
said about coming forward in love.
Yeah.
I think about um that would like for me what that could have looked like is someone saying, "Hey, I'm noticing this.
Yeah.
What's going on here?" Right?
Hmm.
I care
Yeah.
about you. Here's something I'm noticing, but not a what are you doing? You know,
Right.
this is
Yes.
stupid, right?
Yes.
That would have
Yes.
the that I was just wanting to run and hide. But had someone approached me in warmth and kindness without judgment,
Yeah.
wanting to connect with me and lend out, like reach out a hand,
Hmm.
I might have responded really well to that
Right. Right.
and at
Yeah.
least felt seen. And
Yeah. And just maybe I do need help. Like maybe I do.
yeah,
Right. Okay,
yeah.
so how did you take us back
Okay.
where you're in college, you think that you can handle it. It gets worse because you try to stop purging,
Yeah,
and then what happens?
yeah, yeah. So feeling I'm at the bottom of that tornado with no way out.
Yeah.
And um, I remember thinking, I'm going to do this one last time and then I'm going to ask for help. I remember going down and just to the cafeteria and just eating and eating and eating. And then um, I had this restroom that was just like a single restroom on the first floor that I would go to throw up, not in the
Yeah.
restroom on a floor where there was like five or six
Yeah, of course. You needed a
places to be.
private place if nobody
Yeah,
knew.
yeah. And threw up and I went back up to my room and I was always exhausted afterwards. I mean, it was exhausting.
Sure. Hmm.
And I think the radio was either turned, I turned it on or it was already on. And my roommate was a Christian too, and we had Christian radio station on. And James 4:10 came on the radio and it says, humble yourself before the Lord and he will lift you
Mm,
up.
I love that.
And it was like, yeah, it was this personal promise the Holy Spirit was giving me.
Yeah.
And I felt so seen, like, I see you. I know you feel like you're at the bottom of a tornado. There's no way out. If you humble yourself before me, I will lift you up out of that.
Yeah.
And I remember just crying and then calling a woman from my hometown who I knew was a Christian. And they couldn't tell my parents. I
Yeah.
just felt too ashamed to tell them. And she was about their age. And I called and told her. And she responded with so much grace and love. And she said, I've lived about 4 hours away from home. I remember her saying, honey, will you come home? Um, and I said, well, I have to work this weekend, but the Lord worked all these things out. I got off work. I went home. And I told her, I said, I can't tell my parents. Can you tell them for me? And so she told them for me, but I drove home. I went to her house first. So that's
Yeah.
where I went.
Yeah. She was just a safe space for
Um,
you.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
safe space.
Then what happened with your
And
parents? How did they take it?
yeah, well, I had a conversation with, remember my dad, more, and he said, went for a walk and, I was a high achiever in high school, trying to prove my worth. And people saw me as a good girl. And my dad said, people said to me, your daughter, Jerri Ann, she works really hard. And he goes, and I told them, well, I hope if she ever needs help that she'll let us know and we can be able to help her.
Mm.
And then they just asked me how kind of help I wanted.
Yeah.
And I just said, well, I didn't know. I said, I think I need to see a Christian counselor.
Yeah.
And so I started seeing a Christian counselor. And honestly, that wasn't that helpful. I mean,
No.
I've been a counselor in my past, and I've seen other counselors that hugely helpful, right? And transformational. Um, but at that time, the counselor I was with wasn't that helpful. But what was helpful was there's another woman who just started mentoring and discipling me. And I just got to keep sharing my story with her. And she just kept listening.
Yeah.
And we kept reading the Bible together. So that relationship was really helpful. And just me having, like you said, a safe place, someone just to
Yeah.
keep talking to and sharing my story with, to
Yeah.
walk with me.
Yeah. That's so good. So did you ever end up going to a eating disorder specific program?
I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I really started, just really started engaging with Jesus.
Yeah.
I'd write out, I remember
He's the
one of the
ultimate
things that,
healer, right?
yes,
He is.
I read a great book though called Telling Yourself the Truth. And I haven't read it for, 25 years, so I don't know if I'd still recommend it. But at the time it was helpful. And I remember it just started helping me identify the lies I was believing about myself.
That's good.
And then I would just pour over the scriptures to find what is the truth that Jesus says about me,
That's so good though.
and then I would write that in there. So I just started meditating, memorizing and meditating on those truths. So he literally was the anchor for my soul, and my healer.
Is there a better like treatment program than that? I don't think so.
Right. Right.
And were you super familiar with the Bible at this time, or did this like ignite your
Mm-mm.
passion for the Bible?
Oh yeah, it just ignited a passion and a hunger for the scriptures and for Jesus.
Yeah.
And it was
good.
just like when the Bible talks about it, nourishing us. It just did. It nourished my soul. I would spend I'd spend half a day,
Wow.
like in the scriptures and in journaling. Like
Wow.
it was an intensive, like healing program, right?
Yes.
But that's what I did. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so good. And I really can't think of a better way to heal. So good. And I almost feel like there needs to be, because like not everybody's going to have the drive to do that. So I almost feel like there's a need for some type of training program that aligns with what you just said. Right.
Absolutely. I was just going to say that because I am a driven person and independent.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to ask for help, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps the counselor could have been more helpful. I don't know that I really knew how to be vulnerable.
Sure. Yeah.
In counseling, right?
Yeah.
Like I thought I was supposed to show up and have answers.
Yeah.
So I just, I've learned how to ask for help now, but as a young woman, I didn't know how. So I should say I'm learning how.
Yeah.
I'm 50 and I'm still learning how to ask for help.
Yeah, we all are. Yeah, we all are. Yeah. And we're all learning. Like, I feel like, when our generation was younger, like we didn't talk about shame. We didn't talk about those lies that we took on that become our lens with how we see the world. And maybe there's still whole huge populations of people that aren't doing that. I know that in my life, I've been on that journey for like the last 15, 20 years or so, where I really try to not believe those lies and ask myself what the truth is. Mm-hmm. But I think that shame, like the enemy just uses shame. Like he just uses shame to keep people caught in this web where they feel like they can't tell people. Like it sounds like you had loving parents who cared deeply about you, and yet he kept you stuck in this lie for several years that you couldn't tell them, even when you wanted help, right? Because did you feel like you were going to disappoint them?
Oh yeah. And I just, I mean, I was just scared.
Yeah.
Shame sends us into hiding. So I just kept hiding, trying to hide. Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you broke through that, so that's been how many years now that you've been set free from all that? Just
About
approximately
25.
25 years, he set
Yeah.
you free.
Yeah.
That's
25 to 27. Yeah. Well, from the binge purge cycle, I
yeah,
think I still idolize food.
sure.
I still turned to food to comfort me for about the next 7 years. But there's two, transformational experiences. One, I remember in college when the binge purge cycle, the last time I binged and purged, was I was literally over a toilet, and literally the Lord said to me, "Are you going to keep bowing to this? Like, or do you
Oh,
want to bow to me?"
wow. That's
Yeah. And I was like,
powerful.
oh, yeah. Like I still remember visualizing where I was.
Yeah, you don't forget things like that when he
Mm-mm,
says stuff like that to
mm-mm.
you. And so how did you get through
Yeah.
like that 7 years of idolizing food? Was it just continuing to like peel back the lies and ask for his truths, or were there other things that you did to get through that time
It
frame?
was. It was. And lots of journaling. But when we talk about them being willing to speak out to other people, and come out of hiding with others more. Like
Yeah.
there's a few people who I told about this, right? But then I could still, for somewhat how I give myself permission to still keep turning to food. Like I wasn't
Mm,
giving myself permission to bow to a toilet, right?
sure.
But I was still giving myself permission to keep turning to food to comfort me. And I remember being with another woman my age, is late 20s, and just confessing openly with one another to the Lord that we loved food more than Him,
Yeah.
that we thought we couldn't live without that more than we could live without Him.
Yeah.
And that was a breaking point of the food,
Mm,
like having such a hold.
yeah. Yeah.
It's not like I never tempted to go eat, but it didn't
Sure.
have the hold on me anymore.
Well, I just think of that verse and I don't know the address off the top of my head, but confess your sins to one another and pray for each other and you will be
Yeah.
healed. And there's
Mm-hmm.
so much power in just like bringing things into the light
Mm-hmm.
and just confessing
Yeah.
it, and not to be condemned, but to just remove that
Mm-hmm.
shame and like letting the Lord heal that place. And so that makes complete
Mm-hmm.
sense to me that you just confessed it to another friend in love in a safe space and the Lord gave you
Yeah.
freedom.
Yeah.
That's
And that
beautiful.
opened up a lot of conversations with other women, where I
Yeah.
think was just part of the healing journey, right? Just being able to talk and be with other people.
So good.
Um, yeah, kept breaking the power of it
Yeah. And what I love about
over
your
me.
story too is just like it's a process. Like, and he didn't
Mm-hmm.
just set you free from like binging and purging. Then he just brought you into deeper relationship with him. He told you how to listen for his voice. You did have some
Mm-hmm.
like big encounters that changed the trajectory, but he just kept like ministering and loving you
Mm-hmm.
through the whole process. And
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
beautiful. Like it's so
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. So
Yeah. It's really sweet.
25 to 27 years you've been set free. Like praise God. That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have if we have someone listening today that is like resonating with your story and wants freedom and they just don't know where to turn? Like what would you suggest as maybe step one?
Yeah. Well, I think similar to what I did, just think about who's the safest person you could talk to about this.
Yeah. That's good.
How can you come out of hiding?
Yeah, that's so good. And
And like,
preferably a person
and
that
as we
knows the
ask that,
Lord.
yeah, 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 preferably. And there may be a really safe person who doesn't,
Yeah.
like who's just very accepting, who you could tell, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like God designed us to know ourselves through relationship. So our identities are formed through relationship initially, with our mothers when we're young,
Yeah.
as babies. Like that's how we're formed. Like our right brains learn who we are by how other people respond to us.
Yeah.
And ideally they're to reflect to us who we are, how the Lord sees us, but that doesn't always happen, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
And so we have these marred identities. So I think the Lord still honors like
Absolutely.
relationships, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Safe
He
people.
absolutely does. He can use non-believers to save people for sure.
So I guess if I was talking to my daughter,
Yeah.
and she knew a Christian who was judgmental, or
Yes.
someone who didn't know
Yes.
Christ
This
who
is
was
a
very
fabulous
loving
point.
and
Yes.
kind, I would say talk to the other woman who's
Yeah. That's good.
loving and kind.
Yeah.
She might not have the best advice for you of where to go after you share this, She may not give you the wisest counsel, but you're probably going to experience a lot of the things that you need to experience and are being received and loved and adored and cherished right where you're at from that person.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
Which they are imaging God, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's
As
good.
a human, right? So
that's good. Yeah. And then find a Christian that can help pray for you too. So you can just invite Jesus into that space. Or I think doing it on your own is always okay too.
If you need to start there.
Yeah.
And I would think then look for Christian counseling.
Yeah, there's so many good programs out there that are Christian programs. I know somebody that I'm having on my podcast in just a couple weeks that went through one and has just found such miraculous healing through the whole process. And it's just also been beautiful. So yes, so good.
That's exciting.
So let's just briefly talk about vital strengths and what you've created out there. Cause I think like what I love about your story is that you've always been a high achiever. So even though you've struggled, you went through a struggling time, but then you just came out and used a lot of those skills for good. Like I know that recovering from an eating disorder and having a thriving business don't align, but they do, right? Like when you think about the tenacity it takes to get through the hard times and just leaning on Jesus and relying on him. So briefly, I just want to talk about that because I think it's such a fabulous company. I'm super excited to go through the program in a couple of weeks.
Thank you.
Just
I'm
touch
excited
on
to
it.
have you.
Just share a little bit with our listeners about how it started, where it came from.
Okay. Well, I'd love to share about that. I think if I can make a connection back to, the eating disorder, like you said, is that, and then I went and got my master's in counseling and started helping other people with deep broken places, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where I'd come out of and wanted to be able to be a safe place for others. And I had a lot of professionals that would come in, very, lawyers, attorneys, people that were very accomplished professionally, yet they were coming into my office broken and needing my help.
Yeah.
So I think about that, like every business leader, every accomplished person, if they're doing it authentically, genuinely, they've been through hard things.
Yeah.
So there isn't any perfect person out there. There isn't any, probably business leader who hasn't had scrapes and bruises.
Right.
And like you said, learning how to get through the hard things, because starting a business is hard, right?
So hard.
Right. I never knew. So I was in ministry and, I did counseling practice. I helped launch a counseling practice, but it was really different than what I'm doing now.
Sure.
Still, it took lots of effort, but there's a lot of someone else who did most of the heavy lifting for that.
Yeah.
And then I worked for a nonprofit for 20 years and, did leading, coaching, counseling, but I started to come alive more when I started doing some more coaching.
Yes.
About 6 or 7 years ago. And then I started paying attention to that. Oh, when I get up to do coaching, I'm excited. I have energy. When I get up to do counseling, it's still really meaningful, but I'm talking myself through the day. Like, you can do this. Like, you can make it. You can make it through this.
Yeah. And for anyone that's listening, do you want to just give a brief explanation of what the difference is? Because I don't know if everyone knows the difference between counseling and coaching.
Yeah. Well, a metaphor that I learned once has been really helpful was, so as a coach or a counselor, I'm in a passenger seat and like clients are in the driver's seat.
Yeah.
And it's their journey, right? And I'm supporting it to where they want to go. And if I sit there as a counselor, we're looking a lot in the rearview mirror about what's happened behind us.
Yes.
And what we need to process, honor, heal from. kind of like if we're talking about a race car, remove what's dragging us, that what's
Yeah.
keeping us,
Yeah.
holding us back, right? And then if I'm in a coaching seat, we're looking at the windshield about where we're going
That's a great
and how are you going to
metaphor.
get there? How am I going to
That's
help you get there?
a fantastic metaphor. I love it. Mm.
Yeah. So
Okay.
both still helping it to navigate. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so back to where you are loving coaching and feeling like counseling's maybe weighing you down.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a good first season, right? So
Yeah.
I'm a Gallup strengths coach. And when I started learning my strengths, that was another thing that just propelled me forward.
Yeah.
So my number one strength is learner.
Love it.
And learners who are leaders, they learn what they and their people need to know to move them forward.
So good.
So it's going to be like on the brink, what I've always done. Okay, oh, my family and I, we need counseling. I got to learn this, and help us forward. Or our
Yes.
ministry, the people in our ministry, they need
Yes.
counseling. I got to go learn
Yeah.
this. And it was like um, and then I was like, got some healing, started moving. Oh, well, no, I started looking out the windshield more than I was looking in the rearview mirror.
Yeah.
And where do I want to go? And where do others want to go? And I also started seeing people who like um I'm a competent woman, but I also saw for so long other competent people zooming by me.
Sure. Yeah.
And I was like, what? Like it wasn't like I was like, why are they moving so fast and moving forward, keep growing? And I feel like I'm stuck.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And that's a lot of what coaching does. It helps you get unstuck and move forward. And one of the things that helped me was learning my strengths. So I
Yes.
learned about, when I want to move forward, I learn something, right? Or another one's relator. I move forward by forming deep relationships with people,
Yeah.
right? And restorative, like I look for what's missing, the holes, and fill the gaps.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So those kind of things. So I learned about my strengths and what's going to help me move forward, and started loving helping others with the same.
I
And
love
I was
strength
at
finders.
oh good.
I
Me
do. I love
too.
it because it's like,
Oh,
why wouldn't
incredible.
we focus on our strengths instead of our weaknesses
Yeah.
and just lean into our strengths?
Yeah.
And anyway, we don't have to pull on that thread.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about,
Yeah.
let's get more back on track.
Okay.
Sorry, I keep getting you off track.
Okay. No, so I started loving that. And then I was at this a conference for this ministry that I was involved with. And this pastor was preaching from John 15 and talking about pruning the vines, dividing the
Wow.
branches, pruning the branches to make our lives even more fruitful. And he started talking about how the Lord doesn't just prune the bad branches, but the ones that aren't the best to make room for what's most fruitful.
Yeah. So good.
And it was so clear to me that the Holy Spirit was saying, okay, it's time. I'm pruning off this branch of you being in full-time ministry. And it's time for you to move into the business world. And this is going to be your most fruitful contribution in life.
So good.
And I was like, oh, I remember weeping. Like I have a drawing, I drew a picture of all
Yeah.
that was happening there. And so I went and told my husband, I'm going to start a coaching business. and and he who usually thinks I am like Wonder Woman, I can do anything, he like did a head tilt. And he's like, do you know how hard that is? So I was like, I hadn't ever received that kind of reaction from him.
Sure.
And he works with right now he works at a business school with their successful alumni facilitating generosity. So he does, fundraising with very successful alums.
Sure.
And right now he's at the University of Texas, the McCombs Business School. And he said, I'm in relationship with people who've built $1 million, sometimes $1 billion businesses. And they go into consulting or coaching and they tell me how hard that is. And he was like, you know, you have been, part-time, you're at home, but then you're working 20, 30 hours a week also in ministry and counseling, but you've never been in business. How do you think you're going to succeed when they struggle? Like it was an honest question, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like maybe I should do something else. So I started applying for, so after I stopped the ministry I was working with, I started applying for learning and development jobs. I thought, well, what else could I do in the business world? I've always wanted to be in the business world. Where else would I fit? Right.
Sure. Yeah.
And I thought I could do learning and development. So I started applying for jobs. This was during COVID, getting interviews. I'd spend so many hours preparing for an interview, it would go well. And I'd get off the phone and go, I don't want that job.
Yeah.
I don't really want that job. I can say yes to that job. And after about 4 months of that, investing so much time and energy, my husband seeing it, we just started praying more together. And he said, okay, like, I think you need to try this
Yeah.
business. And I said, me too.
Yeah.
Like if I don't, I'm always going to wonder.
Yeah.
Um, so then I launched a coaching business. Initially, it was a coaching business. It's morphed into more of a learning and development company that also
Yeah.
coaches.
Yeah. So good. So good. So you guys have only been around a couple of years. I didn't realize that. That's
Yeah.
incredible in what you've been able to
Yeah.
build in just a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And how many
It's
people have
miraculous.
gone through the program?
Oh, let's see. We have around 40
That's
who've gone
awesome.
through it, business leaders and coaches who are certified.
Yeah.
You know, we have more we've done training and coaching with,
Right.
but we've certified 40 leaders and professional coaches. They're Cosmo certified leadership coaches.
That's so great. That's awesome. I'm excited about what the Lord is doing through you and what he's done. And I just also believe that when we're weighed down by things like eating disorders or bulimia or anorexia, or even just with food, so much of our brain power is tied up in that. Like you said, you plan out, how many hours a day it would take you to eat and then purge and then recover because you're exhausted.
Yeah.
And we think about if we weren't using that time for that, what could we be using it for? Like, what are the gifts that we could be walking in and using those things for the Lord? And it's just it's so obvious that like, if you had stayed stuck in the cycle, that you wouldn't have created this amazing company that's helped so many people. And I know it's going to continue to impact so many people. And I think that's just beautiful. And so if you're listening to this and her story resonates with you, and we just want to know that we want you to know that we're here for you. We will pray for you. Like, I think either one of us would be your safe space. Maybe I'm speaking out of turn for you, Jerri Ann, but I know that I can be your safe space. And the Lord has more. He has more for you. Any final words from you, Jerri Ann?
Yeah. Oh, I think something that the listeners of this podcast would be excited to know is that this framework emerged from the Bible.
Yes.
So that Cosmo.
Yes.
So when I said we have 40 leaders and coaches who are certified, that doesn't include like everyone we've coached or organizations we went and done trainings with,
Yeah.
So the reach is far farther than 40 people.
Well, I still think 40 in 2 years is certified. A lot. I still think that's a lot.
Thanks, yeah. But what's beautiful about this is that this is a framework so we talked about Gary Wood. Gary Wood, his strengths are, he sees patterns. And this was a Canadian who was leading Christian camps across Canada over 25 years ago, under-resourced, not enough money, not enough people to help. And he started asking the Lord, how do I do this? Yeah. And he was in the scriptures, and the Lord started showing him a pattern about what it takes for anyone to grow or to achieve. So if you think about if you think of this Cosmo pattern, Gary was in Romans 6, and he saw how first we come to know the Lord. There's some awareness, right? That's clarity. Then we accept him. That's ownership, part of the Cosmo. Then we start aligning our lives with him. That's the structures. So then we start growing. That's a momentum. And then we want to finish well, right? That's outcomes.
So good.
So Cosmo, clarity, ownership, structure, momentum, outcomes. It's a framework that you would see in any time someone's growing or anytime they're trying to achieve something. And so the story of Nehemiah is a great backbone for the training that we do, and how Nehemiah achieved, and how every one of those priorities is, you can see it in his life, the story, rebuilding the walls. And we have said, what we've done is we have a Christian supplement for our training, but all of our training materials are for general market. So that if a believer comes and they want to learn our frameworks, they can take it right in to anyone that they're leading or coaching.
Yes, I love
any
it.
team. Like we have one woman who's involved in our training right now. She's taking it to the university where she's she serves,
so
she's
good.
over the head of a school.
Yeah.
So you
I
don't have to be
know.
careful, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's accessible to anyone. And I think about how the Lord wants to bring good to all people. So this is a way that we as believers can reflect his image and bring it good to all people with this framework.
I love it.
And then if you care to know more the origin of where it originated from the scriptures, there's a supplement that you can go to.
Oh, so good. And I can include all of that in the notes in case anybody wants to dig into it anymore.
Great.
And
Yeah.
we'll make sure all that is taken care of. Well, Jerri Ann, I'm sorry. It has been such a pleasure to have you on and hear your story. Thank you for sharing your heart and sharing this place of vulnerability, because we need to tell these stories.
Yeah.
It's like when we
do.
take the lid of shame off of everything, like other people feel safe to like come out and be seen and to let it into the light. And it's so good. And, I don't know if you've heard this prophecy, but it's been prophesized that like 1 billion souls are on their way to being saved by Jesus.
Wow.
But, people are, before Jesus, like we're broken, and we need people that are ready to come alongside them as they heal and as they build that relationship with Jesus. And so it's like, we need to be ready for that. And I love that you're part of that. Like, whether you know it or not, you are. So it's just beautiful. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for sharing your story.
Can I share one more thing about that?
Absolutely.
So when you talk about the 1 billion souls being saved, and I think the Lord intends for that to happen in the marketplace.
I agree.
No, not only, but and what he was so clearly called me to was to empower the success of Christian business leaders and restore honor to their strategic place of ministry in the marketplace. And I think that it's like, in Acts, I think 39 of the 40 miracles were performed in the marketplace.
Yes.
I think he intends to break out there.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree.
So exciting.
It is so exciting. Well, thank you for joining me today. And thank you for listening. If you have any questions for Jerri Ann, or you just need a safe space, I will include her contact information in the notes. My inbox is always open, and be blessed, friends. Thanks for listening.
Yes.